laid to rest here. Perhaps the most famous Spencer of all. Eric McInnes, ITN, Northamptonshire.
Now, our correspondents are at three key locations now. Tim Hewitt is at St James's Palace, Helen Wright is at Kensington Palace, and James Mates is at Buckingham Palace. Tim Hewitt first. Tim, are people already gathering there to sign these 4 books of condolence?
Yes, indeed, Dermot, gathering in very large numbers. We're on a roof overlooking the palace, and you can probably see behind me in the street that joins Pall Mall with the Mall, hundreds of people standing and waiting to file into the palace to sign 5 books of condolence. The queue's moving quite slowly. The atmosphere is one, we're told, of calm and tranquility. People are being taken in 5 at a time to sign one of 5 books each.
And Tim, I'm told that the books will be available for signing 24 hours a day.
They will be available until Friday, that's right, Dermot. And already the tributes in those books are very moving. Lots of expressions, a sad loss to the nation. Somebody has written a wonderful princess, and somebody earlier on this morning wrote, William and Harry, take your mother's path in life and use her as an example.
Tim, thanks a lot. Let's go to Helen right now at Kensington Palace, the princess's home, of course. Helen, it should have been the princess's first full day back from her holiday there.
That's right, Dermot. It should indeed have been Princess Diana's first full day back at the palace after a holiday. She should have been spending time with her sons before they go back to school. And it's perhaps thoughts of those boys that are uppermost in the minds of staff who are here as usual today on what is a far from usual working day. I'm told they're all completely shell-shocked by this tragic event.
Helen, is that sad thought in any way reflected in the mood of the people there?
Well, there is definitely still a mood of sadness here. As you can perhaps see, there's dozens of people, scores of people up at the palace gates. People are still bringing bouquets, they're bringing cards, they're bringing poems. I saw a little girl earlier on this morning who'd brought a drawing she'd done of an angel. Underneath it she'd written, Dear Diana.
Helen Wright, thank you very much indeed. Let's cross now to Buckingham Palace. James Mates is there. James, about these funeral arrangements, clearly the royal family have thought long and hard about them.
Yes, indeed, Dermot. The protocol, none of the protocol which has worked on previous occasions obviously seemed right for this one, for a woman who was a princess, who at one time was going to be queen, but is now technically no longer a member of the royal family. Normally speaking, a state funeral goes to the sovereigns, a royal ceremonial funeral to the wives of a sovereign, or the husband of a sovereign, and the heir to the throne, and an ordinary private royal funeral to other members of the royal family. Clearly none of these seem quite right. They settled on what they're calling a unique funeral that will, they hope, fit the request from the Prime Minister and the expectation of the nation for a major national occasion. The Princess's body will be carried from the Chapel Royal to the Abbey. There will be a chance for people to turn out on the streets and pay their last respects on Saturday.
And James, just briefly, are the crowds perhaps subsiding there, perhaps moving on down the road to St James's Palace?
No, if anything, they're growing. I don't know how well you can see behind me, but there is now a queue of people waiting to lay flowers that stretches from the main fence there right up to the Victorian Memorial and off about 100 yards further into the distance. Long, solemn lines, many of them children holding bunches of flowers. It's an extraordinary sight.
An incredible sight. Thank you very much indeed, James.
In Paris, police have been given permission to hold 7 photographers arrested after the car crash for a second day. Under French law, they could face possible manslaughter charges. Officers are examining 20 rolls of film which it's thought could shed some light on what happened. Paul Davis reports from the French capital.
As Paris went back to work after the weekend that stunned the world, a Union flag and bunches of flowers marked the site where a high-speed chase ended in the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, her friend Dodi Fayed and her driver. Official ceremonies of remembrance will take place in Britain, but at the hospital where the princess died, ordinary people have been paying respects as best they can, with flowers and simple messages. Grief also demonstrated in a dignified manner at the British Embassy in Paris, where people have been queuing this morning to sign a book of condolences. The French press, like the British, has been asking the question, was the princess hounded to her death? 7 photographers detained near the scene of the fatal crash are still being held, the usual 24 hours of questioning extended to 48. The men seen here soon after they were taken into custody are all French nationals, with the exception of one photographer from Macedonia. Later today they should know whether they will face criminal charges.
Nothing right now.
Lawyers representing the 7 have been visiting their clients, waiting for the announcement on what, if any, charges will be brought. At the scene of the fatal crash, someone has already delivered a verdict, calling the photographers assassins. The emotional backlash worries those representing the 7.
French justice has to keep, how could I say, a maximum of serenity. There is an enormous public emotion, which is very understandable, but the answer to this very large emotion cannot be an unfair treatment, cannot be an excessive severity of the justice.
Under French law, it is possible that the photographers could be charged with putting lives in danger by their action. Some of them could also face charges for allegedly taking pictures of the crash instead of trying to help the victims. Mohamed Al-Fayed's lawyer in Paris, Bernard Dartavel, says he expects the 7 will be charged with criminal manslaughter. He told me that he's received instructions from Mr. Al-Fayed to first wait for the police to bring charges. If that does not happen, Mr. Al-Fayed will bring a civil action on behalf of his son, the princess and the driver who died. One man who should be able to help the police investigation is security guard Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi Fayad's bodyguard. He is still recovering in hospital, suffering from head and lung injuries, but his condition is not life-threatening. Mr. Al-Fayed's lawyer says there is another crucial witness, a man who was driving a car in front of the princess's vehicle on Saturday night. According to Mr. Dartavel, that man in his rear-view mirror saw the photographers and the fatal pursuit. At first he thought the motorcycles around the princess's Mercedes must be part of an official bodyguard. That man is now talking to the police. Paul Davis, ITN, Paris.
Well, Robert Hall is outside the Palais de Justice in Paris where the photographers are being held. Robert, any signs that the police are getting closer to charging anybody?
Well, no, Julia. We were expecting at the end of today, as is the normal procedure, there would be either a charge or that these men would be released. In fact, we've heard in the last hour or so that the police have asked for a further extension to the time they can hold them in custody, which is actually very unusual. Now, you can probably gather from the number of photographers around me that there's an enormous amount of interest in this case. We're hearing a little bit of, if you like, the other side of the story. There's talk of a witch hunt. There's an account from one defence lawyer that the bodyguard and driver of that Mercedes came out of the Ritz that night and actually said, "You will not be able to follow us," before that Mercedes left. As I say, that's one version of the account. The police are obviously trying to piece together the whole picture.
Well, there's huge outrage being expressed here about the behaviour of the paparazzi. Are the French press similarly inclined?
Well, they are. The papers this morning, here's a small selection of them. Everything, the pictures on the front pages speak for themselves. This one here, the Queen of Stars, but perhaps the telling one here, one photo too many. They've all been putting together a timetable of events on Saturday night. There are accounts that photographers had been pursuing the princess from about 5:30 in the evening when she went shopping on the Champs-Élysées and pursuing her back to the Ritz. The photographers then hung around until later that night. Everybody has their own theories as to what may have caused this. We simply will not know until a full account is put together.
Well, as Paul Davis was saying, one of the most important witnesses is going to be this injured security man, Trevor Rees-Jones. What's the news on him?